It sounds like that's probably added up over a little while.
Yeah, I think so. I think we many times keep a double set of books for the salespeople so that they don't know what really is going on.
Sure. Sure. All right, let's continue this in coaching.
All right, good. And so, the idea is, for all of you, you've got to take the pressure off yourselves in this, and you've got to find a way to make this conversational, and without any right or wrong. I mean, don't even worry about following a script. Your challenge is to get them to hear someone who's comfortable in their own skin. That's really the only thing. That's what they're hearing. They're not hearing the words. So when you trip, or when you catch yourself, or when you concern yourself, I think the issue is you inadvertently send a message because you're too heavily weighted on the words. This is still a body language and tonality world.
Right.
We have to make them feel it over the phone.
Every
That's the
bit.
only difference.
That you're comfortable and you're just having a conversation. So if they say I'm not interested, here's what you say in a conversation. I'm hearing that a lot today. It's one of those days. Look, before I hang up, can I ask you 2 questions? And this will be it. Sure. Is there anything I could have done in this conversation to make you invest 5 minutes with me on the phone? Because it doesn't sound like that's the case. That's one. And second, is there a sales issue that you're concerned about that's affecting your bottom line in such a way that if you could fix it, you would strengthen your bottom line? Those are the 2 questions I'm going to ask every time. What could I have done to have changed it? And second, is there one issue strong enough? So now we'll go to their perspective, because they know what it is. And that's totally relinquishing control with both of the last questions, and that's the issue. You have to totally relinquish control if they're trying to get you off the phone.
Those are your last second shots.
That's
Like,
it.
This is it.
Oh, I'm totally giving up control of anything
Yeah.
with those 2
I got
questions.
nothing left. If they say no and no, it's just over and move on.
Sure,
quickly.
because both of those would be lies if they say no and no. Because one, the first one, is there anything I could have done? Sure, you could have called it a better time. Sure, you could have sounded less like a salesperson. Sure, you could. There are a million
Right.
things they could say. And is there one thing that would have strengthened your bottom line in the area of sales? They know what that is. I mean, they've owned this business for a while, so no and no is truly a no that I'll accept.
Yeah, you bet. You made them actually fight for it.
Every
in both
bit.
cases.
Every bit. Linz?
Couple things. I mean, just to go back to what you were saying before, establish okay before you go not okay. I think that goes along with what you, Sean, and I were talking about yesterday with kind of establishing that expert equal business stature, and that's what you're doing through your tonality, not so much the words. You're making them feel comfortable. So then if you ask them those expert questions at the end when you're post-selling and you're saying if it's a fit, not a fit, it's still strong enough. Because we were saying sometimes if you just say, oh, we'll sit and meet, and if it's a fit, that's great. If not, that's okay too. It can be a little wishy-washy and open up their room for them to say, oh yeah, you know what, maybe it's not going to be a fit, or then they'll end up canceling or something. So I just love that. The decision tree, I think that, if we come up with the 5 most powerful questions or 5 biggest roadblocks that you guys have, and figure out questions that we can even, if this is a value where you can say you have the yes or the no, and you can kind of go along so you're prepared. And that way you have it, and then you just practice it so you don't sound robotic and process and whatever. So that might be something of value that I could pull together. And other than that, this is very valuable for me to just sit and
Esther, what are you hearing as a rookie? What are you hearing in the conversations?
The whole see that you're okay before you feel that you're not okay. It's those 2 like emotion type, you have to establish that kind of respect level first before you can get them to trust you to kind of let that wall down and be like, well, yeah, there is something that is bothering me, not just right off the bat.
Sure.
And I said this in the class yesterday with Rich. I was always on the I was always the prospect in my
Yeah.
old job. I was always on the receiving end, and so many times people would call and they just had no respect for my time,
Mhm.
and it was just, and right there, you know, no, you can't help me. Click. You know, I don't even want to talk to you. Like, don't call me again.
Yeah, sure,
You
sure,
know,
sure.
Stuff like, and the whole kind of like casual, but yet really, you're not being, like you were saying, like you're not being wishy-washy. You're being confident, but you're still being casual enough that it's like, we're just having a conversation.
Stay with the thought that Ashley puts on the table. You want them to visualize their business. That's see the issue first. And then you want them to feel the impact of the issue. That's emotion. So the visualizing of the problems in the business are the see. The feel is the emotion associated with it. And so you have to be able to get them to do two things in the conversation, and that if they can't see it, they can't feel the emotion. And if they can feel the emotion and can't see it, it's just anger. So you have to be able to make sure that you're able to trigger both of those things. Look around your business and tell me what are some of the sales issues you see on a day-over-day basis.
So instead of having specific 3 pain indicators that I robotically go through, have them tell you what those sales issues are by asking the broader question, what are some of those sales issues
Yeah.
that you're experiencing now?
Sure, and even if you put in happy, concerned, and disappointed, most people, when they look around their business, are basically happy. They've had a good first 6 months. Well, by the way, if this person hasn't, that's a good not okay for them. They've had a good first 6 months, and they're looking forward to the second 6 months. But they're concerned about certain things, and even if they had a great first 6 months, there are some sales concerns that they have. Before I tell you what I typically hear, what are some sales concerns that you might have? And so I always go to their perspective first, because if not, I'm artificially establishing things that they're either going to agree with or disagree with.
Yeah.
If they arbitrarily agree with them, I don't know if they're real. And if they arbitrarily disagree, I don't know if they're real. So I'll give them first whack at it by building the site.
So, maybe a little bit off topic, but when we're teaching cold calling or teaching the prospecting and we hit the 30-second commercial, we should probably be changing it to leaving it, making it more open-ended as opposed to having them identify what their prospect's typical.
In President's Club, yes. In Foundations, no.
Okay,
When you teach it in President's Club, more open scope. When you teach it in Foundations, more narrow scope.
got it.
And so now, here's what you learn in Foundations, let me give you a different spin on it. Let them create them first before you create them.
Yeah.
And so, when I use happy, concerned, and disappointed, so if I say anything you're concerned about, and they say bottom line is shrinking, I would say, tell me how that disappoints you. And so, well, it's because I'm gonna have to start laying people off. It's a landscaping business, and we're in our high season, so if we can't close business now, we're screwed. So you can start with giving them as wide a scope as you want, knowing in the decision tree, if it's yes, I have one, you're gonna go with it, but if it's no, you're gonna establish R3. Same decision
I
tree.
love the exact same decision tree. It's just having the guts to let them,
That's
give
what
them
Rich
the
said a
freedom
minute
to
ago.
make.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's knowing, it's having the comfort that you can go anywhere in a conversation. And that's why I say for you, you've had to not have enough conversations to be able to do that. And so more will give you that comfort. And for you guys, it's a matter of just relaxing a little bit and
Yep.
just realizing that you have the answers. And
Thought bubbles, not words, not scripts.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
thought bubbles.
It's an engagement process. An engagement process by its very nature forces two people to interact.
Right.
I love the visualize though, because I remember you first did that, or it clicked for me when we were at Groupon, and you would say, because it was all inside sales, so it's what we're talking about, cold calling, and they were selling to people trying to fill the restaurants, right? So it was, the way you worded it was something like at 6 o'clock at night, prime time for people going to dinner, and you look out at your restaurant and you see that there's open seats there, open tables that aren't filled. You know, what would it do for you to fill up? And so you're just putting them right into that visualization of their business, and there's empty seats and they're like, shit, so it's like, how can we, just like you said, when you sit down with your people and do da 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 da, or when you talk with your people and they're telling you they're almost at the close, or whatever, like real things that they know that are happening. It's more conversational. You're not scripting and robotic, but it's essentially saying the same thing, but in a way that they can really visualize and put themselves in. So
That's a great point, using the senses.
right.
Using the senses to be able to actually see the pain and the issues that are happening around you. That's kind of hitting me for the first time.
It still comes back to taking the intensity out of the conversation and making it something where people welcome a 5-minute encounter and don't feel like they're on the hot seat. And at a certain point, they should feel over the course of 5 minutes like they're comfortable talking to you, and if they're not, then we hit a different issue. So we've got to start developing and driving that comfort earlier, so that even if they say no, it's not an intense no, it's just that, look, I don't see any reason for us to talk about this.
Yeah, which is totally acceptable at that point.
I say that all the time.
And that's where you're having just fun with it too. You're like, oh, they're chasing around prospects and they're exhausted from it, where you say things like that, or they're having a discount price and cut their own arm off to feed their family. Like that type of conversation makes you feel like you're a human being, rather than they're cutting price in order to stay,
No, it takes
competitive,
a lot of nature. It's like Tim asking me if I can help his people do what I just said, and me saying to him, you might better ask me if I can give you the winning lottery number. And so
Right.
I don't know that until
Yeah.
we sit and talk.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this person's kind of a cool guy. Like, I wouldn't mind having a conversation with him. He's not
Yeah.
being this complete sales
Not
robot.
come in overly intense.
And so then, now let's even go to face-to-face. In the face-to-face, you've got to have a more casual demeanor, and you've got to have something that makes them feel like you're both in a living room talking, versus in a sales environment across the desk.
Yeah.
So, how's that living room conversation go? It's a matter of, we should talk a little bit about your salespeople. I'm not so sure that, they're any different than anybody else, but they may be dramatically different. Tell me a little bit about, when you look at your sales team, what do you see?
What do you see?
Yeah.
It's always back
And I
to,
see people who are dedicated to my business, and I say I love that. Dedicated people to a cause is the best army you could have, make up the best army you could have. What else do you see? Well, I see people struggling to close business. All right, well, tell me a little bit about that. And in that visualization process, they should be able to see their people actually struggling in front of a prospect and then throwing price on the fire. It's just, these are little nuances that if you make these little nuances right, it begins to change the comfort level of the call. And all you're trying to do is make them comfortable with you. Back to you for a minute. Thoughts about this from your perspective now, 1 month in here. So tell me a little bit about, in the last maybe 12 minutes here, some thoughts like that. What are you sensing in your interactions?
I guess I'm anxious to get money in, and that's
Yep.
why.
You're Tim.
Yeah, that's why I can't have that living room conversation.
Mhm. And I watch, even if you say that you start out intense, but then you lighten up when you realize what the issue is, but then you go back to intense. And so it's a matter of, that's one of those things that scares prospects off. And I worked with you for a long time on that, because and I don't think I'm telling Ted's out of school, it's not a negative, it's just, he had the words down exactly right. But because he hadn't closed from January until March anything, right?
yeah, we are.
Basically anything.
Yeah, nothing.
I mean, it got to be more and more and more and more this, as opposed to more and more and more this.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're going to experience. It's a logical experience for you, that if you're aware of, you can just kind of sit back and relax a little bit and develop some colloquialisms that go along with it. It's going to be your biggest challenge, because once you crack that, money flows in like you're robbing banks at that point. So.
Well, we've all been there, right? I mean, everybody in this room has been there, and so we were all at a point where we had zero money booked, and we got to the point where we had something other than zero money booked. And it was a shift in transition, a shift in mindset of okay, there's no need to be desperate, there's no need to be intense. Why don't I, for this 1 hour or 2 hours, and I'm gonna make calls, just make the decision that I've already got $1 million in the bank. And just for these 2 hours, I'm just gonna pretend to act in that manner, have some fun, be loose, and we're gonna see what comes of this. And that's when success starts to happen. We start to book appointments, and you just allow yourself to be a little bit more free. Talk to myself as much as I'm talking to you. But to get out of that early rut where you feel the pressure, you feel some of the anxiety, and you feel like you have to be Johnny on the spot with everything you're saying, really, you don't have to be.
But it's that way with everything. You stood there when when we were doing videos at Summit, and Rachel said, Bill, try not to be scary. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, you're the scariest guy in the world when we video you. You are not Bill Bartlett on any level. You remember that conversation? And she said,
I was like,
yeah, I know, it's the truth. And what she said is, what's Mattson's secretary's name? Desiree and I were gonna go get 2 shots of Crown Royal and have you drink them before this video shoot. Because we figured, you remember the conversation, that's the only way you would loosen up.
Yeah.
Because the camera would go on and I would know the words and I would lean for it and she would say, everybody in the room would go, holy shit, this is not gonna go well at all. So everybody, it happens in every new circumstance. And you know, I've done those talks 100 times, I've stood in front of the room 100 times, but the issue is what? When the camera is on and the lights are there, it changed everything about me. Literally everything about me. And so that's what you have to realize. In here, it's a great conversation, but out there, you've got to take what you're learning in here and just simply be yourselves. And just not give a damn, in all honesty. That's when negative reversing works, that's when not okay works. If you care too much, that stuff can't work.
if I can make a recommendation, Sean, just because I noticed this, even during the regional role plays, in which I've said to you many times, just in chatting or debriefing, is do a role play with Bill or any of us where you're literally just taking the information they've just given you and focusing on that. That will keep you from always being in your head about what's the next perfect question, how do I, and literally just, that's the rule. You can only take what they've given, what the prospect has given you, and bounce off of that. Because when you guys were just doing that and he gave you, we typically close at 24%, but we're doing 17%. You could have taken that and just like totally, you could have gotten numbers from that. You could have gotten, how much money is that to you? So just go through that. That'll dump you out of that. Like, I've got to be this Sandler ninja where I'm executing everything perfectly. And pick one, I think Tim and I were talking about this, pick one part of the system that you're just going to do well during that call. Not everything. Say, I'm just going to execute during this sales call an upfront contract really well. If I do that, then I've succeeded. And rather than having hit all 7 steps perfectly, it's just not realistic. So just it'll help you slow down a little bit. So
That's a great thought. The one thing that changed you dramatically was me saying, go out there and have fun.
Yep.
Stop with the upfront
Stop.
contract.
You just said stop.
And I remember the conversation. I remember when we did it. Just go out there and blow things up and have fun.
Yep.
Is exactly what I said. And that's what you did. And that's when things all of a sudden began to change.
Yep.
When you want to blow things up, when success is blowing them up, when success is having fun versus closing business, that's when the system changes. And so I think the model is you should be out there finding as many no's as possible and blowing people up and celebrating them, because the failure then is the yes, and the yes equals failure plus money.
Which is the happy.
Yeah, it's a good 1 + 1 = 2 model.
Well, I love the freedom that you feel and that your prospect will feel, whether you're in person. We can take everything that we're talking about right now and translate it to our face-to-face meetings, our first ins, which I'll do at 9:30 this morning. And that is, look, there are a number of different issues that we see, but before I even start to talk to you about any of those, I'm just curious, from your side of the table, what are your 2 or 3 biggest sales issues
Look
that
at
you're
that.
facing?
If you could just bottle that 30 seconds with that stuff right there. I mean, in all seriousness, that's the Rich Austin that I know. If you could just bottle what you just did right there, not even 30, in 20 seconds,
Yep.
the real you came through. And your eyes weren't staring a laser through my head, your body language wasn't intense, you were just talking. And in that, when you listen to that again, and you will on the video, the challenge is you'll hear the real Rich come through versus a manufactured one that we think we have to be.
Yeah.
Now, Lindsay's comment, that's gonna be my 8:30, would you just have her sit in the thing?
Hi, how are you? Good. Yeah, you mind
notified like a think closet, because that's a good place.
Isn't it?
Let me grab that, not his book.
So I think the challenge is, to Lindsay's point, you don't have to know anything if you just play off their responses.
Yeah.
You really don't have to know a damn thing. And so if we can just get you to think, she just did it, 24 to 17, there's a difference there. What do I need to ask
There you go.
about that difference? I don't need to go anywhere else but right there,
Right.
because what they give me right there will take me somewhere else. And in that take me somewhere else, it'll be the right place to be.
Yeah, get away from the pain funnel, because that'll just completely screw you
Yeah,
and missing
yeah.
valuable information that they're giving you, right, in the
100%.
conversation, and you just miss it.
Yeah, my goal is even to make sales calls on people who know Sandler but who never see me using it. And you know, that was the best example of Paul from Sales Eye. When I made the call on him, he knew, because Nigel screwed this up royally in the UK, what an upfront contract was. And when we finished the sales call, he said, aha, you don't do practice what you preach. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you didn't execute an upfront contract. And I said, well, what do you know about an upfront contract? Write it down. So he wrote down to tap. And I said, okay, let's talk a little bit about that. The first T is what? Appreciation, right? Thanks. Did I show appreciation for you allowing me to come up here? He said, yeah. I said, well, how did I do that? He went through it. Time. Did we create time? He said, well, yeah, we said you're gonna spend an hour with me. I said, and where are we in that hour? And so, you know, it's not using the formal to tap to do it. It's making sure that all the elements are in there. So when even a formal Sandler guy tries to bust you on it, they're in there. But they're just coming out your way. They're coming out in a way that allows you to say them through your personality.
It's like the pain funnel without the questions.
No,
Like we did you and
that
I
was
did.
life-changing for you when
For
you
sure,
did that.
for sure. And that's how my upfront contracts also sound, is they sometimes I'll get the thanks and time right in the beginning, but outcome might not be 30 until 40 minutes into the conversation, and then we can adjust on the fly.
Yeah. This is a get real world, and as fast as you can get real in front of them, as fast as you can close them. But I think, you know, we know the pain funnel questions, we know the upfront contract, and we just rigidly try to get through them, and then we become scary at that point versus just conversational.
I know you got an appointment here, but I think the next role play might make sense to do the pain funnel without the
Yeah.
questions.
Sure.
Without, you just do how you and I did it. I'll even write it out. I know you've got it, but I mean, I've got it memorized anyway.
Mhm.
And the challenge is you can't use any of the actual questions, verbatim questions so instead of saying, you know, tell me more, you know, I would
I
say,
understand.
how do you know there's a problem? Because that's a tell me more, it's just without
Which is
saying-
what you would normally say. You would never say, tell me more. You would say, well, it's an interesting thought, but how do you know that's the reality?
Strip, reverse.
Yeah.
And so all you see in the pain funnel is strip line, reverse. And then the next one would be dummy curve, reverse. Or, you know, then the third one was the negative reverse. And then we go, you know, and so that's, does that make sense to do that? Because that was one of the most powerful things I've ever
Yeah.
seen in my entire life.
No, it does for sure.
I don't wanna lose the other part of the divine, because we were,
Agreed.
yeah, so there, I know we had said, we either wanted to, once we close
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
Agreed.
then how do we set it up for training there, I mean, I don't wanna lose that
So
either.
let's split the next one in two. We'll do divine the first
Yep,
30 minutes,
yep.
so you can set up my calendar next week. They'll set 2 role plays for the week I'm back. Although you won't be here.
We're taping it, we're
All right, good,
recording
good.
it, so
Yeah,
we're good.
that's
Let's
true.
just keep these going, because these are talk tracks that we can all stuff
So Ash,
into our
let's,
brains.
you and I talk about when those will fit, and then you can put them on the calendar and send out the invites.
Perfect. And is that where we have a divine, like, we
Yeah,
have a
we'll do
divine
that.
here,
We'll
I'll
put
get
it
a
in front of
sample
me.
divine, and,
Yeah,
okay,
We'll pick a couple divines and put them in front of
Cool.
me, and then we'll just convert those into training.
Well, and I think what we did with Kenton, what we did with Kellen Scott, it could be an integral part of that as well. where you've already got all the notes pre-written on each individual
Yeah,
person.
that's what I love.
You're just gonna deliver it as like, before our interaction today clouds my judgment, I've already went ahead and I've established what I would tell you if you were hiring this person or considering hiring this person without knowing.
Yeah, I mark up my divine one before they do, so they can see my notes. What did I write here? Says here, this guy can't sell. What do you, yeah, no,
No, that's exactly it.
Tim's like, I can do that? What?
I can do that? Holy cow.
no, it's.
Talk about blood and guts.
It's classic, because
Yeah,
it's not you being a
seriously.
jerk, it's what you wrote down, so.
Well, it's the data they gave you,
Oh my
that's the cool
God.
thing about that.
Oh my God.
It'll be a great session. Thanks,
Good,
Bill.
no, that was a good.